Hello and welcome to A Genteel Black Hole, the home of my bookish rambles. My name's Ali, and to quote the Beastie Boys, when you've got so much to say, it's called gratitude. And that's right. This is the Gratitude and Joy tag. It's a series of prompts all about, as the title might suggest, gratitude and joy. It was created by Book Chat with Pat, and I am very grateful to have been tagged by both Mark from Book Ramble and Mark from The Book Thing. How's that for full marks? Question the first is, name an author whose books bring you joy, or discuss a specific book that made you feel joyful. Well, for me, the first author that springs to mind is Terry Pratchett. I first read Terry Pratchett a long time ago, like when I was maybe 10 or 11. I must have read some of his children's books before I ever read a Discworld book. But although I enjoyed them back then, they didn't really click for me and they didn't stay with me in the same way that, say, Douglas Adams did with The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I read that when I was 12 and just became obsessive. And for a long time, I didn't really love Terry Pratchett all that much. But about 4 years ago, something like that, I revisited Terry Pratchett. I read Weird Sisters, and having become a huge Shakespeare nerd in the intervening years, Weird Sisters hit differently for me then, and it set me off on a path of really growing to adore the works of Terry Pratchett, to the extent that when I started this BookTube channel, the channel name that I chose was a quote from Terry Pratchett. The full quote is from Guards Guards, by the way. I think it goes something like, a good bookshop is basically a genteel black hole that knows how to read. Anyway, there's a lot of ways in which I am massively grateful for Terry Pratchett and his books. For starters, of course, they are just incredibly funny and entertaining. I know that when I pick up a Terry Pratchett book, even if it ends up not being a favourite, there's going to be something in there that does bring me unqualified joy. And that's really valuable, especially these days when so much of the world does not bring joy. But that's another reason why I'm so grateful for the works of Terry Pratchett, because he knew that the world is so often disappointing and just awful a lot of the time. He confronted the failings of political systems, of religious institutions in general, and people personally. And he wrote about how angry that can make someone, but how important it is to experience that anger and then channel it into doing something good, doing the right thing. And that is an incredibly potent and important message now as ever. So I find it oddly comforting to be reminded that it's okay to be dissatisfied with the world, to be angry about it, as long as you're using that anger, channeling it into something positive. He did that with his books, and he infused them with humor, the sort of sugar that helps the medicine go down, as it were. And that means a lot to me, and means that I I find his books joyous and delightful to read, but also profound and meaningful in terms of their social commentary. And yeah, for that, I am very grateful. Question the second: discuss something about BookTube that you find joyful. Well, I have a couple of things in mind. For starters, there's the BookTube community. I have been here on BookTube for about a year and a half now, and I've found people very welcoming, very warm, and very encouraging. The number of comments I've received, just encouraging me with my video making, with my creativity, with my reading. I really value all of these comments, and the personal connections that I've shared with fellow booktubers. I get a lot of joy out of keeping track of my favorite fellow booktubers, and although I don't manage to watch every video that I wish I had time and energy to watch, I try to keep up with all my BookTube friends, and leave thoughtful comments on their videos as well, because that, I think, receiving comments especially, I think that is a really encouraging and valuable form of interaction, beyond kind of viewer counts and subscriber numbers, all of these kind of metrics that can be numbered and charted. That's fine. It's nice to see numbers go up too. But when someone actually takes the time to craft a response to a video and share how it has touched them or made them laugh, that is a much greater connection between people, and it's that kind of connection, that community, that means the most to me on BookTube. And just on a purely selfish note, I find the creative process joyful. I originally started this channel because I have been having some ongoing health issues which have prevented me from doing my usual work, which is music. I am a songwriter, singer, guitarist. My last album came out in 2022, and since then I haven't been able to work on music the way I want to. So having this other creative outlet, which doesn't take as much physical strain as playing guitar, has been really valuable for me. So yeah, just on that personal note, that is another thing about BookTube that I find very joyful. Question the third: discuss a book that focuses primarily on friendship. Well, when I think of books that focus primarily on friendship, and especially on kind of positive portrayals of friendship, my mind immediately starts to think more about children's books. For some reason, I think adult fiction doesn't seem to focus as much on friendship, or if it does, maybe I just kind of, it doesn't seem as central to most adult books that I can think of. But when I think of children's books that focus on friendship, one thing that springs to mind is The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. This is a book about talking anthropomorphic animals and the friendship between a mole, a rat, a toad, and a badger. The character who is the kind of catalyst for the action is Mr. Toad, and he has a kind of impulsive and obsessive personality. He goes through phases of being deeply obsessed with one thing or another. At the start of the story, he gets a caravan, like a horse-drawn caravan, and thinks this is the only way to live. And then when the horse-drawn caravan is forced off the road by a motor car, he suddenly switches tack and becomes obsessed with motor cars to the point of stealing one and getting in trouble with the law. And his friends, Badger and Ratty and Mole, they basically have to do an intervention for Toad and try and convince him that he's ruining his own life and making everyone else's life harder with his impulsive, obsessive behavior. And although by the end of the book, Mr. Toad does retain quite a lot of his big-headedness, his pompousness, he does gradually learn to temper it for the sake of his friends. So although it's not a saccharine story at all, it is essentially about friendship and its importance and how people can grow and improve with the help of their friends. Question the fourth. Discuss an author or a specific book that makes you laugh. Well, I already discussed Terry Pratchett at length in response to the first question, so I suppose my other favourite humorous writer would have to be Douglas Adams. I've been a huge Douglas Adams fan, as I mentioned, since I was about 12. And yeah, I've just always found his work really funny. But one book that I would particularly recommend is not actually a novel, but it's a dictionary. He wrote this, The Deeper Meaning of Life. Originally The Meaning of Life, but this is a kind of expanded version. He co-wrote it with John Lloyd, who was the producer of Not the 9 O'Clock News and QI. I've actually met John Lloyd a couple of times, and he's a very lovely guy. But anyway, this The Deeper Meaning of Life is essentially a dictionary of things that didn't have words for them yet. So Douglas Adams and John Lloyd originally kind of played this as a parlor game, that they would go through maps and atlases and find place names and then imagine what those words might mean. And so you get things like Grimbister, a large body of cars on a motorway, all travelling at exactly the speed limit because one of them is a police car. Schoonspruit, the tiny garden sprinkler thing your mouth does sometimes for no apparent reason. So this isn't a book that you would read cover to cover. I assume I must have read every definition at some point, but it's essentially something that you can pick up every now and then and just flick to a random page. And Massachusetts, those items and particles which people who have just blown their noses are searching for when they look into their hankies. Ugh. And one word which became part of my family's lexicon when I was growing up is shoebriness, the vague, uncomfortable feeling you get when sitting on a seat which is still warm from somebody else's bottom. Question the fifth. discuss a book where the idea of community is important. Well, this might be a little bit out of left field, but I recently read this massive coffee table book about one of my favourite bands. The book is called Cardiacs, a big book and a band. Cardiacs, a big book and a band and the whole world window, which is a reference to one of their albums, A Little Man in a House and the Whole World Window. But it's basically a huge collection going chronologically through their career with loads of archive photos and like gig posters and album artwork and ticket stubs and all that sort of stuff. But it also has a load of little paragraphs from people who have either been involved in the band, played with them or supported them, or people who have become part of the fan community or the kind of community of musicians that has grown up around Cardiacs. It's a vibrant community of people with similar tastes and similar musical interests and inclinations, and it's all grown up around this one band, which itself was the brainchild pretty much of one very talented, very dedicated person, Tim Smith. He and his older brother Jim were the only constant members of the band. And I mean, it was a community effort, the whole band, but it was masterminded by Tim. But yeah, as I say, just the community, the fan community and the musician community and the overlap between the two is amazing, really. They're a unique band, even now, despite all of the other people that they have influenced and inspired since the late 70s when they started. Nothing else really sounds like Cardiacs. But it's something that so many people have been inspired by and strive towards. I myself was hugely inspired by Cardiacs. When I first heard them, they totally changed how I hear music, how I write music, and I have kind of ended up on the very outer fringes of that musical community. I mean, my band Bug Prentice recorded a cover of a Cardiac song called My Trademark, which was included on a tribute album that was done as a fundraiser for Tim while he had some terrible health troubles. So, I'm proud to have contributed to that community in whatever small way that I have. But reading through the book, it really brings home how dedicated, devoted that community is as fans and musicians. So yeah, that is, I think, a great example of community. And if you want to hear my band's cover of Cardiacs, then I'll put a link in the description, as well as a link to another Cardiacs cover that I participated in with a long-distance group of musicians who are all also on YouTube. So yeah, if you want to check out either of those things, then feel free, but also prepare your ears, because Cardiacs are perhaps an acquired taste. Oh, but fun fact about My Trademark, the lyrics of that song are cut up from the rules of Scrabble. Question the sixth. Discuss a communal reading experience that you have had. Well, when I was growing up, my mum used to hold poetry parties. My parents are Scottish, so they would hold it on Burns Night, but people didn't have to read out Burns specifically if they didn't want to, which, frankly, most people don't want to. But that was a really fun experience. They would invite people round for dinner and have a load of poetry books lying about so that people could pick one up, pick a poem, and just read it out. So it was a very low pressure way to encourage people to perform, and occasionally people would sing as well, bring an instrument, but the focus really was poetry, and it was fascinating to see the different range of poems, the different styles and moods that different people were drawn to. It's something that I looked forward to every year. I really enjoyed those parties, and yeah, I missed them really. My favourite poet to read at the time was John Hegley, and I have actually made a full video where I read some of my favourite John Hegley poems. So yeah, I'll also put the link to that in the description. Question the seventh. Name a book in which a character demonstrates real gratitude, or name a book that left you feeling a sense of gratitude. Well, one book that left me with a profound sense of gratitude was A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin. This is a young adult fantasy book from 1968, I think. And it's ostensibly about a young boy called Ged, who becomes a wizard. He goes to a wizard school and learns how to do magic. The way that magic works in Earthsea is all based around language. So everything in the world has a true name, and a name in the language of the making, as it's called. So even people will have a true name like Ged, or a used name, a name that they use daily. So, for example, Ged is known to most people as Sparrowhawk, and only the people that he trusts most will actually know his true name, Ged. And while he's at this school, in a fit of kind of arrogance and jealousy, he accidentally unleashes this terrible power which nobody can name, nobody can tame. So on a surface level, that's what the book is about. But on a metaphorical level, a lot of it is about recognizing and accepting the darker parts of yourself, accepting them as part of you, and learning how to become a whole person. And that's a fascinating thing to me, and something that I've not read in a lot of other fiction. So when I read that first time round, I was very grateful for that. And also when I read it, it was a particularly difficult year of my life. I first read it in 2020, which, as well as being the start of the pandemic, was also the year that I lost my mum. So that was a very challenging, very difficult year that came with a lot of difficult and dark emotions. So reading that book at that time, and rereading it later as well, I found it profoundly moving, very meaningful, and it did fill me with a real sense of gratitude. And the final question is to tag others to spread a sense of joy and gratitude. Well, I haven't checked before making this video who has already done this tag, so I'll go and do that before I post it and tag some people in the description. But if I neglected to tag you, then if you want to take part in this tag, consider yourself tagged. Anyway, that's about it from me today. Why not let me know in the comments what books or authors have filled you with gratitude and joy? Anyway, I hope you're having a lovely day, and I will see you when I see you.